we created a system where we had 40 different people making those phone calls. We can use the same kind of infrastructure to do the same thing for the census. So we will do that as part of our ministry effort, and we'll talk about how we'll go about that.
And I'll ask her on Friday, has she gotten one of those forms to fill out? And if she hasn't, what can she do then? What can they do then?
I can get you that information. There is a number to call. There's a number to call, and I could just get that information and get it to you, Jean, before then.
Okay, sounds good. Okay.
Thank you, everybody. I have to jump.
I need to get your number. Okay. I don't have your number.
Oh, you want my number? Hold on. Let me give her my phone number. 404-408. All y'all write my number down because you might need me.
I'll send it to her. I can send her your number.
I already need you.
She'll send it to me.
I'll send you her number.
Okay.
I'll send it to you. I'm going to send it to her.
All right, sounds good. All right, talk to you later.
Okay.
Write it down.
Yes, sir. Okay. Thank you. Thank you all for coming on.
All right. I enjoyed it. Thank you all.
Will be back. So you'll be back.
Excellent.
This was a good one.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Forever Young, the show that celebrates life in what is called the post-youth age. I don't know how you want to describe it, but again, this is a show that we call Forever Young because you know what? Age ain't nothing but a number. And I'm so excited about today's guest. We've got a great show. I'm your host, David Linton. This is a production of Hope TV. You can follow us on all social platforms, whether it be Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Apple TV, or Roku. Wherever you want to view, we're there. And we're so excited, as I said, about this show because we are now in a very important segment of the year. It's the political season. And, you know, seniors have been very politically active because, you know, especially if you're a boomer, you've been on the forefront of so many political activities. And so today's show is power-packed. And so I want to really get right to the meat of the show. And I want to start off by introducing my co-host. First, my co-host, we call her Miss Beautiful. That's Jean Hendricks. Jean, how you doing today?
I'm delighted, as always, David, to share this platform with you. I am just wonderful. I'm wonderfully made, and I am wonderfully beautiful. Back to you, David.
All right. Yes, you are. And today we're excited. Anytime she's on the program, she's so busy, but I'm so glad that she's found time to be with us today. And that's Dr. Sharon Mitchell. Dr. Mitchell, welcome to our show and welcome back.
Thank you, David. I'm so excited to be back again. Excited for this subject today, particularly in the climate that we're currently in. Again, thanks for having me back again.
Well, we're excited. As you said, we are in the political season. And so we're talking about elections because of the COVID-19, the way we're voting, absentee ballots, limited voting. We know that the things that have been going in Georgia about voting, even from last year. Yeah. So, you know, the key thing for us, as we've all known, especially those of us at the House of Hope, we have a social justice ministry. The thing is getting people engaged. And I know that each of us have been politically engaged. Me, believe it or not, I started getting engaged with politics after the assassination of after President Kennedy got killed. I was like 6 years old, but I remember watching that whole weekend of activities, and I was really intrigued. And then, of course, Watergate. I was the kid who sat home doing Watergate. Everybody was out playing. I watched the Watergate thing. And so I've always been interested in politics. And I learned so much about being on the local level. So today, Jean, I know you always have something to kind of set the trend before we bring our guests on. So would you share?
Yes. And the title of my reading today is Being Politically and Socially Active. And there are 5 qualities of a good political leader and of good social leader. Deciding which candidate to vote into office is simply a matter of party affiliations for many people. Others, however, cast their vote based on specific characteristics they look for in their candidate of choice. So what are the qualities of or characteristics good for a good political leader should possess? Here are the top 5: honesty, compassion, integrity, confidence, flexibility. Great political leaders have all of these qualities and more. Each aspires to respect different views, analyze problems, and identify the best solution, not based on loyalty to political parties, but rather based on what is good and right in the best interest of the nation or community as a whole. Back to you, David.
Why we're so excited about today's show. That sets the tone because we have 2 guests who are very active. One has been in politics, but we're all in politics when we get active. And so I can't wait to get them on the stage. So why don't we first start with our first guest, is Eva McMillan. Now, Eva is a head of the social justice ministry at the House of Hope Atlanta. She's very politically active, and we'll find out a little bit more about her career and let her speak in her own words. So I'd like to, everybody, let's welcome Eva to the show.
Welcome, Eva.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited about today to share. Thank you.
Give us a little tidbit about Eva and who Eva is.
Okay, it was very interesting when you started off talking about the assassination of JFK, because I remember that was my first inclination about injustice. And I was 8 years old. And it was from that point that I really started looking at injustice and how we, especially people of color, were treated. And it's still to this day, I can remember where I was when the announcement was made that he had been assassinated. I remember where I was when Medgar Evers was assassinated, when Dr. King was assassinated, when the 3 young men in Mississippi, because I'm from Mississippi, were killed, Cheney and Goodman and Swarner. I remember those things, and those facts have kind of shaped my involvement and made me who I am today as far as when it comes to social justice.
More about those. Those are 3 riveting incidents in our history that I think we all can remember where we were when those 3 things happened. I know I can. Our next guest he is not only walk to walk, but he's talk to talk. He also has, not only is he an activist in terms of social justice, but he's actually served in the Georgia legislature. And I'm talking none other than our own Mr. Magnum. I like to call him Magnum. We have a little history, but we want to welcome him, Randall Magnum, to our show and have some fun.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here today. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you.
Well, Randall, like we said, we have a little fun, you and I, because we've done some things together. We're fraternity brothers. But I want you to give everybody a little bit of your background. Like I said, you served in the Georgia House, so you've seen politics from the inside, but you've also been an activist on the outside. So give us let our audience know a little bit about Randall before we get into some of the other aspects of the show today.
Fantastic. Well, I got in politics. I think I was intrigued with politics at the age of 8 years old. My mother bought encyclopedias, and I read in the encyclopedias and saw who was running Congress and who was running the nation. And so I said, I can no longer be a dentist. I want to be a lawyer, and I want to be in politics, and that began it. And I served in the General Assembly for a decade, 10 years, and prior to that, I helped other persons in elective office. I've helped elect other congresspersons and various people with various levels. I was the state campaign coordinator for Jesse Jackson in 1988, as soon as a young lawyer out of law school. And I've enjoyed being in politics and politics and ministry. And so many people, I had a very difficult time reconciling politics and ministry and law. And now I'm even reconciling business. So I'm excited about being here today.
To have you here today, Randall, because again, it's a common thread with all of us. One of the questions I was going to say, when did you start participating in political activities? But just in the conversation, in your opening comments, I think we all kind of started when we were very young, and we were all motivated by some activity. So I would like to ask the question, to me, I think that is most pressing as we look at the landscape today and what's happening, societal, voter suppression, stand your guard, stand your ground laws, all these things, murder of the young man Aubrey down in Brunswick County. Eva, when you see all of this, where do you draw that extra strength? Because you've been doing this a while. Where do you get that extra push to go? Yes,
there is a quote by Benjamin Franklin that has always kind of motivated me, and I'm paraphrasing it, but it says, "Justice will not be served until those that are unaffected are as outraged as those who are affected." Mm-hmm. And so when I think about things that have happened, especially now in the climate that we're in with Avery, it just kind of shakes you to your core. These last 2 weeks have been really a struggle in trying to say to myself, just keep pushing, mm-hmm. With the pandemic, and then with these things still happening, as I shared, I remember the 3 young men that were in Mississippi, because I'm from Mississippi, and that were killed. And we didn't really start seeing change there until the nation became outraged at those young men who were murdered. And so this is what it's going to take now. It's that our nation has to become outraged at the things that are happening to people of color, all people of color. And so when that happens, then I think we'll start seeing change. And it requires us to speak up and to speak out. My grandmother was one that influenced me a lot when it came to politics, because she was not an educated woman, but she stayed involved in community. She stayed involved in the things that really mattered, for getting people elected, talking to people, and back then, you didn't really have a major voice, but within the Black community, the ones that did, those politicians would come in and talk. And so she was one of those that was kind of like a bargainer. Now, if we get this, can you promise us this? And so I kind of took my cue from my grandmother and my father, who was a pastor, who always talked about doing the right thing, just doing the right thing. And so I see us as today, unless the entire nation becomes outraged, that we're not going to get very far. But we have to continue to fight on. We have to continue to push. We have to continue to open our mouths and speak up when sometimes it is not even favorable to speak up, because you could get knocked down if you speak up. It's the right thing to do.
Right.
That, you know what, and that's so poignant. Now, Dr. Minster, you guys, you and Jean can jump in here at any time and ask our guests any questions. Okay. But you really said something too about the influence. You started your grandmother, you don't have to be educated, but you just know it's a matter of right and wrong. You know, I know for me, my mother getting involved at the school board level, just to make sure that we were able to go to the right schools. And that also inspired me, because most people always look at what's happening in DC, but they forget what's happening around the corner. And that's the most important thing. And so, Mr. Magnum, as a former legislator, give us an insight of, you know, what goes on under the dome, as they say. And after being in that, being inside and now being outside, how has that changed or motivated you to become even more active in terms of political activism?
I am so honored to have served in the legislature. One of the things that I can say that really surprised me, and I think it goes to African Americans in general. There is a badge of inferiority. I would put it like that, and it's people don't want to talk about it very much. But I went in, I was like, hey, can I do this? But once I actually got into legislature, I discovered that they're just regular people. They're regular people. And in fact, one of the saddest things that I can say is I know many people that probably could do a much better job than the people that are serving in the actual offices. Leadership is something that we do when we initiate, and so often we just let our communities go, and we are not, as my sister Eva was saying, enraged. And I like for other people to be enraged, but I think that if we can be enraged, when I was in the legislature, sad to say, I would hear from white women. White women would complain. They would call, they would write, they would let me know their feelings more than any other group. And I represented a diverse group. But beyond that, black women are the most powerful group in the African American electorate, because they vote more than, unfortunately, our men. But at the same time, our men are needed in the political process. And so when it comes to it, one of the most enlightening things I saw was that it's really a matter, are you enraged? Are you involved? Are you caring enough about whatever the issue is to make a difference? Because the difference is when we get involved, and it's the silence, the deafening silence of those that we think should support us, that makes the difference in, so for example, some initiative to fail. Most of the governor's races have been decided by, for example, a couple of 100,000 votes, or but the number of unregistered African Americans in Georgia, over 500,000. So those people, you know, I want everyone else to be enraged, but I think it's more important for us to get involved, because we are uninvolved. Things happen that otherwise would not happen. Because I was involved in certain movements, I was offered, if you just get off of this point, we'll make you a judge. If you just do this for us, power concedes nothing is one of my favorite guys, Frederick Douglass. Power concedes nothing without a demand. And so often we're not demanding anything. Politicians come to our churches and we don't demand anything. And the Black church in particular was the cradle of activity. The NAACPs met in the basement of the Black church. And without the Black church, no one will be elected in Georgia. If the Black church stands up, if the Christian church stands up, as a Democrat, for example, when you ask me the differences, as a believer, I've had people say, okay, you must be a Republican because you're a Christian. But that's a perception, I think, that's so false. And we can make a difference if we just stand up as Christians, because we've sat back and allowed others to run it. But God has made us the head and not the tail, above and not beneath. And I just believe that I can make a difference. And I sometimes get frustrated when I see, like, the Aubrey case. I've seen justice. This week I had a brother to die who was in the prison system most of his life. I tried to get him out, but it was not enough. But he was just caught up trying to come in the window of some white woman down in Griffin, Georgia, where my hometown is. But he just got caught up, and all I can say, and I'm going off the end of going off the subject, but basically, I think that the challenge is for us to step up and say that we are involved and that we care about whatever the issues are. And we have to find a way to get our young, our old, and one of the greatest things is when our old, who know better, you sit back and just refuse to get involved. So we got to get everyone involved.
Well, you know, you hit so many points, Randall, that's so pertinent because, and I was going to bring Jean in right now because, again, this is a show, it's entitled Forever Young if you're just tuning in, and our topic today is political activism. And, you know, in political activism, it really started with, you know, you go to our church, you understand the boomers, the builders, and all that. We will do that. But I want to go to Jean because Jean was on the front line. She's probably the youngest among the group here. So she was on the front line of the movement, should we say. So you just give us a little synopsis of what you went through, and then we're going to bring this up to 2020.
Okay, just for a few seconds, during the time that I was heavily involved in the Albany movement, was a very critical time. Of course, back in the day, African Americans were not allowed to go into certain restaurants or to ride to the front of the bus and all these types of things. So in order to become involved, I think I became involved when I was around 16 years old, just being tired of not being treated like a regular citizen. And I was raised in a very Christian household. My father was a minister, and my mother's always said to us, never ride the bus because you have to go to the back. Well, of course, a couple of times I did go and ride the bus, but I sat on the front seat. And of course, I was asked to go to the back. I just want to see what it felt like. But it was a very trying times, and that's when I became involved in the movement because I wanted to bring about a change. I marched. I knocked on doors to get people to come out to the mass meetings. They were called mass meetings in my hometown, to get people to come out to the mass meetings, and people came. And I think even today, in order for us to get involved, we've got to make some contact with people. I was thinking when Magna was talking a few moments ago that I wonder how many people are actually a member of the NAACP. How many of them attend the meetings? How many of them know what's going on in our society today? We have to become involved if we want to be a change. I mean, the age has nothing to do with it because, you know, I'm retired. I'm still active with the NAACP. I still participate in those types of events that I can to support it so that it will be a functioning organization. I mean, there's so much that we can do, but so many times, a lot of us just sit laid back and expect somebody, but then when something happens, like the young man was killed in and we're ready to, you know, get on the front line. But what have you done before then to keep things at a peace? You know, have you participated in your community? Because I went to your city hall to the meetings of this type, and that will, of course, bring about a change. But it has to start within your own self, in your own community, to bring about a change so that it will be nationally. Back to you, David.
You said something about, we mentioned it earlier about the institutions in the community, especially in the Black community. We're going to break it down today. The strongest institutions with the church are historically Black colleges. And I know that at the House of Hope Atlanta, we have several ministries, and we're going to get into the social justice ministry, ask Eva some questions. I know she and Mango work on those, and I was a member of that. But Dr. Mitchell, I want to go to you because you kind of oversee some of these special ministries that we have going on. So what was the impetus to really start a social justice ministry? And then Eva, I wanted you to go and then tell us about your involvement and how we're moving and what people can do to get involved. Dr. Mitchell?
As Mangum indicated, the church has been the institution that has galvanized all efforts as it relates to social activism. So a church like House of Hope, which has the number of people that it has, a social justice ministry is necessary, not just during a time of election, but at all times. Whether it's justice that has occurred, as we saw in recent weeks with the young man, or whether it's for local issues, even something as simple as ensuring that people participate in the census. That determines how monies are spent. Ensuring that zoning boards decisions are are done in a way that it impacts us. So social justice for our church is not just a political arm. It is an arm that ensures that the justices and the rights of brown and black people are represented. That may even be at the school board level. It could be at the county level. It could be at the state level. And we have to be enraged about all kinds of issues. We find that we are disparate as it relates to healthcare. So we should be enraged about healthcare. The fact that many of our people do not have healthcare, cannot afford healthcare, do not have access to healthcare. We should be enraged in terms of voting access. The fact that some people may not have the ability to have polling precincts in their communities. We should be enraged as it relates to decisions made for transportation, whether or not we have transportation to get to and from. So there are a number of issues for social justice that don't just occur during an election time for a church like House of Hope. It is an ongoing issue. The battle is not over. We continue to fight. And it's because of the shoulders, we stand on the shoulders of those who fought before us. And so the baton is now in our hands to keep that going.
Well, you know what, Nat? Thank you for that, Dr. Mitchell, because what you said is so poignant because, again, it's all levels. And so, Eva, being that you are one of the coordinators of the social justice ministry, and what are we doing, or what is your organization doing right now in this political season, your involvement? What are some of the activities, and how can people get involved if they're watching and wanting to get involved right now?
So currently what we're doing is that we're actually pushing for full participation of the 2020 census. We were on the call this morning with Janet Lee, who heads that up for DeKalb County, trying to determine what can we do during this pandemic to really encourage people to fill out the census and to get people to turn it in. And so she gave us some real good tips on what we need to do. And so we're working and seeing how we can implement that by using our social media platforms. We send out what we call newsletters to those that are a part of the social justice ministry. It could be just a text that says about what's going on with the census, where we are right now. We're only for DeKalb County, and I say DeKalb County because I live in DeKalb County, so I'm really involved in that, is that we're only at 57%. So we are below the average of what the state is right now. The state is at 59%. We're below that average. And that we want to get 100% because that determines, even after COVID is over, where we're going to get medical supplies, where are we going, what's going to happen with our schools, because those dollars would then come down to those in those counties where we have gotten the representation from the number of people that are being served in the county. So it's very important. And so we're pushing that. We're sending out emails. What we do is that we've encouraged our members who are part of social justice that when they're talking to their family, when they're talking to their friends, mention about the census. We're saying, ask them, have they done it? Have they filled it out? It only takes 10 minutes to fill it out, but 10 minutes is going to impact for 10 years. So let's do the best that we can. So we're doing the 2020 census. We're also involved in getting out, rocking the vote, making sure people get registered to vote, and we're sending out that information because it's very crucial right now of getting those absentee ballots and getting them back in the mail. And so we're trying to make sure that our people, through emails that we're sending them, know these crucial dates, and then that they're telling their people as well, their family members and their friends. So that's what social justice is doing right now.
One of the questions that I was getting ready to ask, and I'm going to ask it, but it ties in, how do we get our younger generations involved in social activism or politics? And, the one thing about COVID-19 and being sheltered in place, it's forced everyone to pick up a little technology. Everybody's had to, pick up their game on technology. People are Zooming, they're Google Meeting, they're doing things that they weren't doing. Facebook was just one thing, but now people are doing all kinds of activities. So how are you using the social media because we know that's where young people live. They live on their social media. So are we using that? Have you found ways to use that to contact them? And also, I'm gonna ask that to Eva and then to you, Attorney Mangum. How are you using the social mediums to reach people and spread that word? Eva, I'm gonna let you.
So what we're doing, we have two young ladies who are millennials that are actually taking over producing our newsletter. And they're a lot more savvy with the internet than I am. I just recently learned how to use Zoom. And so we are utilizing them. And then what we have planned is that in the very near future, we're actually going to use the Zoom platform, and also Facebook has a platform now where you can invite people in and just call up different people and let them come together and have a visual party. And so there's some things that are going to be coming down that we're using the social media to help foster that, get the word out. And we're really excited. I think this is an exciting time that we're in. I mean, the pandemic really charged us to really rethink what we're doing. And so I think it really, for us at the social justice level at House of Hope, bringing in those young people who are really now excited about doing something because they want to work, they want to do something, but they want to see, the hard thing is that they want to see results quick. And sometimes you just not results. So it requires those of us who are more seasoned and have a little bit more patience. We've learned patience. We encourage them and say, hey, you're doing a great job. It may take a little time, but together we're going to get this done. And we just keep encouraging those young people to continue to work alongside of us. So we're really excited about that, about them being a part of it and helping us season people to meet.
Well, you know what? You said something interesting, and I'm going to come to you, Attorney Mangum, but you just said the microwave. You want everything now. So from you, with your knowledge and your experience on the inside, and I think, because so many people haven't been inside politics, and I sit on the board in Henry County, so I'm learning government from the inside, being on the Development Authority. But man, being in that dome, we know the guy at 1600 is using technology, right? But he's using it in a crazy way. How can we use technology from your side to get people involved? Because you've got that experience from being on the inside, and that is so key. And how can we share that?
Yeah, I just want to applaud Sister Eva, because that is it, to get the young involved and do like these Zoom parties. That's a great thing. While in the legislature, one of the things that I did, and one of the things that I do right now, is I always try to I do mentorships. I try to mentor someone younger. This is amazing. As I am articulating principles and things that I've learned, it seems that it clarifies itself, and I get something out of it even myself. So as we reach out and we do these mentorships, and as we are continuing to be involved, I'm involved with the People's Agenda, which meets, this is an organization started by Reverend Dr. Lowry, who just passed, but that organization meets every Tuesday at noon. And that is my way of staying in touch with the movement, but at the same time, in that organization, for example, younger persons are now put in place to actually conduct the meeting on several occasions, even though they don't do it all the time. And so I think it's important for us to bring the young persons in, even on Forever Young, to let them see from a different standpoint what Sister Jean went through. See from a different standpoint what some of us went through, because I'm amazed right now. One of the things that I did when I first got out of law school I did a lot of voting, civil rights litigation on voting rights. I would go into boards, and it's amazing. We would go into boards, a county commission or a board that had no black people on there, and we had something called Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. There are forces that were smart enough to knock that provision, Section 4, out, which implements Section 5, so that we cannot enforce our rights to vote. And that's, I think, one of the most challenging things we have, because when Dr. King went to Lyndon Johnson and said, we want a Voting Rights Act, he said, I want to do it, but you got to go out there in the streets and make me do it. So we got to motivate people to get involved. And it starts with young people who have very little to lose, whereas some of these boomers, they are afraid to speak because their jobs are at stake. They have other things to lose, so to speak. And that's why it's so important to get religious leaders and various persons to get involved. Once I believe we educate them as to it matters with the census. It matters that we paid 1 cent into transportation. We still don't have rail coming to South DeKalb. And once we educate people as to the issues, that we don't have health care, and that African Americans are dying at a disproportionate rate than other people simply because of health care and diet and a whole number of issues. Once we educate people, I think they become more involved. And I think that if we would just go to them and bring them in, and that's one of the hardest things, because they do want microwave. They want it microwave. I do something on Monday evening that I've started with, that I gave up on it, I came back to it, but I have some millennials that I speak to on Monday nights, but they want it right now. They want it right now, and sometimes they're so impatient. But some of the things that we've learned over time is so important. So we just have to stay up on top of it, be vigilant to stay in touch and say, what is important to you? And that's one of the things I think that we can reach them more with. What is important to you? So that whatever it is, and then relate it to the global vision of what is important to all of us.
You know, I think that's really important that you say you got to make it relevant to them now. Now, Gene and Doc, if you got a question, please jump in here, because, but you know, making it relatable. I always remember when President was running for re-election, his simple question was, "Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago?" I mean, that was a very simple question that you could look at and you could answer yes or no. And so I think when it comes to this, when you talk about census, people have to understand why do they have to fill out the census. What does the census mean? It means more money for your schools. It means more money for that, because there's still this myth that I'm not giving them my information. No, they could come looking at me. But guys, they can look at you now. You got telephones, you got cell phones. If you don't want that to happen, throw all that stuff away. So let's now get the information that we need so we can, you know, improve and better ourselves. I think as I know we're getting close to the end and we're winding down, I could just feel it. But what is the most pressing thing? I'm gonna go to Eva and then come back to you, Randall. What is the most pressing thing right now in 2020 as we're getting ready to go to the polls, whether it be the presidential election or the local election? What is the most pressing thing, and that you can tell that audience right now that they have to participate? What is that most pressing thing?
Well, I would say the most pressing thing right now, I believe, is going to be the 2020 census. And the reason being because that is what determines where the money is going that's going to help you. You know, we sometimes we focus on the national level and we forget about it's the local thing, local and it's the local distribution that really affects us. You know, when you have a president who said, "Oh, let your states handle it," well, that means that you got to put the right people in office at the state level. You got to make sure that you fill out the census so that your county will get the money that you need to be able to help you. You know, food banks. The census determines where food banks are. We're a hospital. What goes to the school system? So it's all of these things that we don't really recognize that we are dependent upon, that is really based upon the number of people who fill out that census, how those dollars are trickled down. And there's one thing I want to say before I give it over to Randall, is that especially with the young people, one of the things that I find is that sometimes we're speaking the same thing, but we're using different language. And sometimes the language barrier gets kind of murky, because as a person who grew up during the time of segregation and then integration, that a lot of things we call it as racism. They don't see it as racism, but it really is. It's just a different form of it's buried under a different cloud. And so when talking to them, I generally have to point out, well, Mom, Auntie, that was back then, babe. It's still happening now. It's just affecting your pocketbooks, and you don't see it, but it is still there. And so really getting to get them to understand of why they need to be involved, because it is going to affect them. I'm doing what I do now because of my grandchildren. That's how I work it. I see it. They have to have a future. They have to.
Language is everything. Words are so important. And I'm going to come to you, Gene. I see you, but I just know that what you said, Eva, is so powerful, because it goes to what our pastor says when he preaches. He says you have to have the Bible in one hand and a newspaper in the other, because you have to make it relatable to today. So that is so important. We have to make sure that when we're talking about political activism, when we're talking about getting involved, especially to this current generation, just like someone had to talk to me, talk to you, we have to make it relatable. And words are really important. Phraseology is important. And so I'm so glad you hit that point, because that sometimes is where we miss the mark. That's where they call it the generation gap. And now it's communication gap, And I know Gene always has something for us, and you want to say something, Gene, so I want you to chime in.
I was just going to ask Eva a comment before we got ready to close. How can we, as Forever Young, continue or encourage others, especially when it comes to the census? What can we do to make sure that they are being a part of the census? I'm concerned when you gave that number about the percentage of people who have mailed it in. I'm a little nervous about that now. Is there anything you think we can do?
Yeah, one of the things that we were talking about this morning is called a phone tree, where you get on the phone with, we can do conference calls, and you talk to several people, and then have those several people commit to calling several more people. We talk to people all the time. Just be conscious of, intentional to mention, hey, have you filled out the census? It takes 10 minutes. And it's very important. And then begin to go down the line. Have them to go on to sign on to the website, and it tells you what happens with the dollars. What the dollars actually do in the community, because it does. So getting involved, just each one reaching one. That's the simplest thing.
Very good.
And it's educating. You got to educate us. Right. Yes.
Yeah.
And you can fill it out online.
Yes. The problem is that some of the people, especially the elderly, don't have access to that. And so what we're trying to figure out now, especially, and Dr. Mitchell, we want to figure this out, is of our elderly constituents, our elderly congregation, calling them and said, have you filled it out? Can I assist you to help you fill it out? Some of them just, this new technology is, it goes over there, and they really don't have access to it. And so with them not being able to get out, where they had a segment where they were going to come to your house, that's not going to happen now. So it's all going to be left up to technology and to
Right.
each of us talking to someone else.
Okay.
Right. That's good. That's good.
Well, we're getting ready. We're coming to the end, coming near the end of the show. I've got a parting question, and then I know Jean has something she wants to impart with us before we leave. But how do we make sure that this election represents us? What is it that we can do? And I want everyone to give us, starting with you, Randall, what can we do to make sure that this election, whether it be the primaries that's happening right now in the state of Georgia, and then of course nationally, how do we make sure that this election represents us? And when I say us, I'm talking about us.
Well, the way that the challenge that I'll put it like this. I believe in tithing, not only a tenth of my money, but a tithe of my time, my tabernacle. The tenth is when some people put it that way. One of the things that I've seen is so few of us care anything about anything other than what is going on with self. And what we have to get out of is getting all we can, sitting on our can, and forgetting about the world. So I want to challenge the baby boomers. I want to challenge everyone to find 3 organizations in addition to your church, because I'm going to not include the church, but I am going to include the church because we're not even involved in church anymore as much as once upon a time. Right. So not only do we want to give our tithe, our 10%, but if we would give that 10% about any number of hours per week, per month, then that would make the difference. When I was in the legislature, sometimes money was not the issue. The issue is just having some legs, someone to stuff an envelope, someone to make a phone call. And as Eva was talking about a phone tree, COVID-19 is a blessing. We can organize like we've never organized before. Yeah. We can grassroots like we've never grassroots before, and connect to people in ways that never been connected before. And if they don't have Zoom, they can have a phone. If they have some way that we can reach them. So I'm going to challenge the baby boomers. I'm going to challenge everyone. Pick 3 organizations and just do 2 hours a month, 4 hours a month. That will make the difference, because it's not what other people are doing. It's what we are not doing. The silence that we have, we don't show up. And if we don't show up, we lose by default. That's the biggest thing I see, and we have to get more involved.
That's great. And for you, Eva, do you want to add anything to that?
I agree with everything that Randall is saying. You know, it's so important that we really stay connected, and me personally, just making those phone calls, especially, and talking to people, being intentional, just asking them, you know, and then when I met with opposition, because sometimes I am giving them the 411 of why it is important to you. Right. And how dare you it's not important? It's important.
Exactly.
You know,
we have to.
I guess because I'm of age, they're not going to really come back at me too hard, but especially some of the young people, you know, and most of the time I'll get, okay, I promise you I'll do it, you know. So, but it's really just talking it. And as Dr. Mitchell said, educating them, get out there, let's get it done. Let's do it, you know. So yeah, that's.
Dr. Mitchell, anything you want to add to that
comment?
So
for me, I agree with both our panelists. I would add that if we want change, we've got to be the change that we want. Right. So that means 2 things. Either we got to be registered to vote, and if we are not registered, we need to register. And if we are registered, we need to cast a vote and exercise our right to vote. We found that this last administration got in because we stayed home. Right. We have no choice not stay home. We've got ballot requests that was sent to our homes. Some people have them buried and stacked. We need to fill that out. You don't even have to go to the poll to vote this time around. You can fill out your absentee ballot request, but it's imperative this time around that we register people who are not registered, and those that are registered actually exercise their right to vote. We must cast our ballots to show that we want change. The way that we're going to have change is if we cast our vote to get the people into office that represent us and our issues.
All right, thank you. Now, Jean, I know you have a part of the prayer that you wanted to share with our audience.
Yes.
So I think this is the perfect time for that.
Okay. And before I do my prayer, let me just mention something that happened to me I had a phone call this week from one of our listeners, and she said to me, Jean, I want to let you know that because you always say how beautiful you are. Of course, the first thing I do in the morning is I pray and I thank God for me being able to get up to the mirror, and I say to myself how beautiful and how gorgeous I am. And this lady called me and said, Jean, I have started doing that, and do you know I feel so much better about myself? She said, I am beautiful. And I said, oh yes you are. So I just want to throw that out at you. So those are the crazy things I do. Somebody's listening.
That's right.
For my daily prayer, it says, when I wake up, Jesus, I love you. When I leave home, Jesus, come with me. When I feel like crying, Jesus hugs me. When I feel happy, Jesus, I adore you. When I do something, Jesus, help me. When I make mistakes, Jesus, forgive me. When I go to sleep, thank you, Jesus, and cover me with your mantle when I awake, and continue to keep me forever young. That's it.
Right.
Beautiful.
All right. You know what?
And
First of all, I want to thank our guest, Eva McMillan. Thank you so much for what you're doing and for spending some time with us here today on Forever Young. You're an inspiration, and you are definitely one who is leading the pack. And I would follow you because I know that you're going to lead me in the right direction. To Attorney Magnum, again, continue to fight, continue to mentor. We thank you for your service to the state, and that you're still being active, because as we say, political activism, it starts with us. If we want to be the change, as Dr. Mitchell said, we've got to be the change. And so it doesn't matter how big or how small, but again, this shows that we're all in this together. This is, we may have come on different ships, but we're all in the same boat right now. And so we have to get together and be very active in the political aspect. Fill out the census. As you look, fill out that census, get the money that's coming to you, get the money that's coming to your communities. Go vote so that you can't say, because if you don't vote, it will be them. You can't say what they do. It'll be what I did to myself or didn't do to myself. Stop being the victim and be the victor. So on behalf of Jean Hicks, Sharon Mitchell, and our executive producer, Dr. E. Dewey Smith Jr., my name is David C. Lynch, and we thank you. And always remember, no matter what, age ain't nothing but a number, because you are forever young. And we'll see you next week.
thank you guys for what